Welcome to episode 4 of the Trucking and Tech podcast. My name's Alex, and this is my brother Peter. How are you doing, bud?
Excellent.
Nice.
Better than ever.
Okay, I like it. We go down the rabbit hole of Loadboards, okay? The good, bad, and the ugly, and what opportunity exists. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it sounds about right. Opportunity, i.e., wink, wink, we all know what we're talking about.
All right, let's get started.
So first is going to be, why even use a load board?
Okay.
Because the argument would be, like, it's expensive. It's per seat, right? So if you have a dispatcher and, like, you have used Truckstop, you have to pay per seat at Truckstop. If you use DAT, you have to pay per seat for DAT. And the load boards are really strict on their data. Mm-hmm. Like, they do not, they don't want anyone basically, like the free load boards, copy the data from DAT and then repost it on their own load board. I'm sure there's probably some legal stuff there. Who knows? But they don't want anyone to take that data. So that's why they charge you per seat, and that's why it's behind a paywall. But it's like, do you even need to use a load board as a carrier? What's your answer, Alex?
Yes. Wait, I thought you were going to outline the steps first.
Oh, okay. So the first is going to be kind of like the value proposition for a carrier. Why do you even need to use this? Because if anything, like if you ever watch a video and someone's complaining about the load board, don't use it.
Right.
And then you'll see the realities of what it's like to ship freight not having a load board.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, I think it's important to highlight here is like there's a difference between local freight and long haul freight. And it's like maybe if all you do is local runs, you never need to touch a load board. But the moment you step out and you deliver freight cross country, like how many people do you know on the other side of America that you have good relationships with, business relationships with, that you can haul freight consistently for? Tough. Okay. So I think our personal experience is load boards in the specific perspective of long haul freight.
I mean, long haul. I would even say regional. If you're crossing state lines,
okay,
bro,
yeah,
state lines, right? You gotta. That's if you're
that's
going from one state to another. Who do you know? Like that's like 5-6 hours even. It could be. You can. I mean, Texas is like 13 hours across, and it's like. Good luck even if you're starting out by the Louisiana border and you end up by the New Mexico border. It's like, who do you know by the New Mexico border that's going to get you a load back?
El Paso and Texarkana are 2 worlds apart.
Dude, right. And so it's like, yeah. So in a, yeah. So
that's how I know I was a legit dispatcher, right? The fact that I can just...
that you know where El Paso and Texarkana is?
That's right.
Okay. So first question is, why do we need a load board? Second question is what?
Second question is going to be the current tech of the load boards, like what's good, what's bad, and the third I think would be is like what can be improved.
Okay, all right. So I think we answered the question: why do we need a load board? Right? We're starting there. We're kind of answering already, and essentially is like marketplaces that have a lot of users, right, on both sides. The shippers or brokers need to ship stuff. The carriers want stuff to haul, and so when there's a lot of people on that marketplace, it makes it beneficial for everyone.
Right. And specifically, right, if you think about it, is that once a shipper, let's say, is used to working a certain way, and that is they give out their freight to a middleman, a broker, and the devil, right? Mm-hmm. I'm kidding. They give it out to a broker, and they're used to certain process to getting freight out the door. If you come in there and you say, hey, why don't you change all your process and just like email me direct? That's a pretty big change for the shipper. So the other I think effect that happens with marketplaces inevitably is like shippers dig kind of a tract as to how they expect to work, and then it's really hard to get them to change course. Right. And so it goes via middleman, and then the middleman takes all the care of the logistics because the shipper really doesn't worry about all this stuff. And really, like all of the stuff, like carriers, load boards, and brokers all benefit the same customer, the shipper.
Right. So
it's like load boards exist for brokers. Brokers, it's all connected downstream. But it's like it starts with the shipper. So if you're I was gonna say stripper. If you're a shipper, it's like what you really want as a shipper is you want the cheapest, most reliable shipping service.
Correct.
That's your goal. You're not the most reliable, the cheapest, but maintaining reliability.
Right.
And it's just like it's that edge. Because like if you get a bad carrier who lies about insurance and lies about everything, and they say they have a hot shot and they show up with a rented bumper pull trailer from U-Haul, you're probably not going to put a $80,000 transformer on a bumper pull trailer.
Right.
By the way, Hotshot's got a bad name for this because of exactly that reason.
Right.
Like there's guys that do this. I got a 1500. I got bumper pull. Can I hotshot?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many messages like that did you get, Alex?
A lot.
So I'd say that's the first one. It's like this all like before we get caught up in like the details, like remember this is to make the shipper's life easier.
Right.
That's where the money is coming from to fund all this. Because carriers wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for people making stuff. And vice versa. Maybe people who make stuff wouldn't be able to make as much stuff if they couldn't get it around to other parts of the country. Because if you could only sell to your local vicinity, your business is limited.
Right. And that's the whole thing, like yard sales, right? It's like literally yard sales, you can only sell to your local area. But there's a bunch of people that go to yard sales and they just post it on eBay. They post it on Craigslist, which has a little bit more, you know what I mean? So it's like,
That's right.
Imagine shippers could only ship to their local area. All you'd have is essentially yard sale-esque shippers.
Right.
And that's just not going to work.
Is that a good overview?
Yeah, I like it. I think it makes sense. Okay. And so what was the second part?
Yeah, second part is load boards and kind of what they're good at right now. And what they're bad at. Do you have your first take?
Goodness gracious.
A lot of loads.
Right. So volume. Plenty of options.
That's right.
Okay.
And anywhere in the U.S. So
Right.
it's like you can preemptively search in your current location. So you can search your current location, or you can preemptively search where your truck is going to be next week.
Okay. So they're good at volume. Anything comes to mind on your end? What else are they good at? That's it.
Yeah, like I think in the day-to-day value, that's probably all the value a carrier gets.
Okay.
I like the user interface isn't that great.
Well, okay, hold on. I one just came to mind. Price.
Price is good.
Okay, so for a couple $100, for $200, maybe I think whatever the load boards are now, you can book your truck, a step deck, a team. You can even book a team truck that'll do $40,000 a month every month, and all it costs is $200.
Yeah, the ROI value on load boards is extreme. I for sure very much agree, because I think we were paying. It's like if I give the analogy for this with like Netflix subscriptions, and I ask like people who are well off, like if you're like a middle class or upper middle class, you probably have a Netflix subscription, which I think is like $14. If Netflix all of a sudden called you and said, "Hey, it's you, your wife, and your kid. We're now charging you $100 per seat for Netflix," the amount of people that could still afford Netflix at $300 a month, I think, would be roughly the same. But the amount of people who would cancel the subscription in pure shock. This is the end of America. Like the amount of pushback that Netflix would get to charge $100 per seat would be insane. It would make net news headlines everywhere. This would probably be a good marketing campaign for Netflix for April Fools.
Yeah, I know.
Like talk about getting attention. But with load boards paying $100 for a seat, you don't bat an eye because it can generate hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue on a few $100.
Right.
Like so,
and one guy can dispatch 6 trucks, so 6 or 7 trucks, and so if you figure you're paying $200 a month to book 6 or 7 trucks at $25,000 per truck, that's maybe $100,000 a month. Like, dude, that's. I mean, if every other investment or if every other software or service, like, you know what I mean, if they did it, if that's how much you made on each and everything that you subscribe to for $200, you'd be a very, very happy man.
Right.
So price. What else? I think that's it. I think the list is very short. Essentially, volume and price. That's the 2 things load boards do really well.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And then, like the data is legit. So this is the other thing with like not free or free load boards is like free load boards. Like you often call them the loads already covered. Like it's never like what you see is not what you get. This is known as WYSIWYG for like text editors, but premium load boards are WYSIWYG. What you see is typically what you get. And there is some data quality issues there sometimes, like with brokers playing games, like posting a load that's full just to get calls, and then you call in, and it's like it turns out it's an actual partial. And so maybe this can transition to like what load boards are not good at.
Right. I was on Amazon Relay. Right. Amazon Relay. Every load has a book it now feature.
Right.
Every load.
Yep.
It's not an option for whether the broker wants to enable it. It's not an option whether this load is booking now. No. Every load can be booked it now. Like, dude, maybe driver calls. You got an emergency. You need to book it, and you need to get him home. And that load meets, like, I would book something that gets my guy home if it's an emergency, right? So it's like every load has booking now. Amazon is good. Every load is very, very accurate. Weight, dimensions, and exactly, specifically what equipment is required. Every load.
Loadboard.
I think that's the only two I got.
Okay, so you know what? It's funny. You just gave me a thought. Where Loadboard's currently right now, and I'm going to specifically focus on D18 Truckstop. That's what I have the most experience with. Central Dispatch, we forgot to mention. I just realized that's for cars.
Right. Yep.
The issue that they suffer is that the data isn't always available. So if a load is posted with no rate and 2,000 pounds and it's posted for 48 feet full, does that mean it's actually 48 feet and 2,000 pounds? It's like, who knows? So you have to, like, the load boards don't enforce standards on the brokers, or maybe they can't enforce standards on the brokers. That'd be another way. And so what ends up happening is you have, like, this breaking down of information systems. And so the only way to then increase the information in the system is to then physically pick up the phone and call. And the thing you gave me that thought in my head was where load boards are right now are like negotiating with used car dealerships. The price you see is not the price you have to pay, versus what Amazon's doing is like a Carvana model. We already eliminated all the headache of going back and forth negotiating. Here's the floor price. Are you interested in this is the price that we have to sell a car out to make our margin consistently.
Well, no. Carvana is, I wouldn't, maybe CarMax. CarMax, I think, standard, right? They don't do new vehicles, but it's like, all, because I think I applied to Carvana, and I mean, you can ask the agents too, it's no secret. They get $100 for every vehicle they sell. It's not like
fixed.
They get a wishy-washy commission, right? Fixed commissions. All you got to do, and they sell it below retail, right, or below what the car is worth, so everybody gets a good deal. They have all the financing already set up. So essentially, I think it's CarMax where they did a really good job. They took all this stuff out of this wishy-washy. But if you go to a used car dealer, like a buy here, pay here type of person, like. That's essentially what it's kind of is like right now. I think
for sure
that's what you're saying.
Both load boards are definitely like that, where it's like you always have to negotiate everything, and that takes a lot of human time. That takes a lot of human capital. And so, like, maybe a modern solution to this would be kind of a CarMax model for a load board. Although, like, you enforce a standard that, like, loads have prices, and they have to be at some kind of agreed upon margin between the broker and the load board that you would be able to get it covered for. And so it's like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Like, would that actually even work? I don't know. But Amazon obviously is able to do this. But Amazon's able to do this because it's their own shipments. Right. It's like, it's not, Amazon doesn't have like Amazon, what is it? It's not Amazon Flex. What is it called?
A Relay.
Oh, Amazon Relay. It's like, it's not like they have brokers post their information. It's like they're just posting it and they make it available for their carrier network. And so I think like TQL Loadboard or CH Robinson Loadboard or Coyote Loadboard, I think they're trying to replicate that model. Like, hey, if you're a preferred carrier and if you have a good history, the rates are going to be a little bit higher for you versus if you're a new carrier, and you can instantly book it.
But the problem with those load boards is, even though it's free for the carrier, because they are also I mean, I guess the argument is the same for Amazon. Like, you don't know how much they're actually getting on that load, right? It's like, what if they're posting a load for $3,500, but they're actually getting it for $6,000?
This is definitely a hidden truth of dispatch, and that is personality matters a lot.
Okay.
If there's a load on the load board and it's like paying $4,000, depending on your personality, you might like if the broker has margin in it, you might be able to like wiggle a much higher rate than a person with no personality. And so the reason personality has to play a role is because all this data is not available. Like, they don't make it easy. And so if a load boards could solve that somehow, I think that'd be kind of great. But I don't see that happening in the near future.
Well, I mean,
and they are trying to come out with Book It Now. Right. And I think
Right.
we need to highlight this point is like the reason why Book It Now does not work on the load boards currently is, in my opinion, well, when you click Book It Now, what they're actually doing is pointing you to a portal for that specific broker. And then you got to go sign up to that specific portal for that specific broker. And so that Book It Now feature looks consistent, but it's completely fragmented past that button. And so then you click Book It Now with the expectation that you could book it, and then you got to do another setup. It's like the carrier packet situation all over again. And that's A. And then B, what carriers end up doing, what brokers end up doing is posting a rate that is far cheaper than what you could probably get than if you called and negotiated.
Right.
And so if the incentive is, well, if I click book it now, I'm underselling myself consistently by a few $100 versus if I call in, I could book it maybe for a few hundred more. And if you could book a load for a few $100 more and you book 500 loads a month, 300 loads a month.
Oh, right.
That's
Even for a
adding up.
small, yeah, even for like just a one truck operation, you're doing 5 to 7 loads. And even if you're negotiating $100 extra, that's $500 to $700. The average car payment right now in the United States is like $600. So there you go.
Right.
You just got a free car payment.
By negotiating an extra $100 every single time. That was one of the things we taught. Is like, if you can't negotiate a lot, negotiate at least $100. You can't get $100, at least $50. Something. Always get something more. And so book it now misses that feature. And so if you could basically just like price in that negotiation that people are going to want to naturally negotiate 20%, 10 to 20%, price that into book it now. I think book it now would immediately take off.
And now, what would you base that rate off of? Lane rate data? Like, what would that be based off of?
This is where it's challenging because TQL has their incentive structure that's different than CH Robinson, that's different than Coyote. And so you would have to go to them and you basically say, like, you would have to have carriers come over to you. Like, the negotiation power of having to be a representative of all the carriers is the only way to do that. But
Which is
they
impossible.
can't. Which is impossible because how are you going to get all the carriers before you get all the rates? You're not. And so it's a chicken and egg problem. Mm-hmm. Like, brokers will not bend the knee unless they're absolutely forced to by the market forces. And anytime someone thinks that I could gather all the people together in one pool and be a market, that's like a union at that point.
Right.
And unions traditionally just raise prices, like for consumers.
Right.
So it's like it's one of those things that's hard because like an enforced premium on a rate means higher cost to a shipper, which means higher consumer costs.
Right.
The money has to come from somewhere. The money has to come from somewhere.
Right. It's like what good is it if the truckers are making, $3.50 a mile when everything in the stores is twice as expensive because of it? It's like all of a sudden you don't really win much. Okay.
Yeah.
So
those are some of the problems. And
pros and cons of the load board, right? I think that's what we covered. Okay. And where are we headed? Where are we headed? Where could we improve? What is the industry like, with all the technology? So it's like, my opinion is that we're kind of headed first is to more fragmentation, right? And so now, if you're a big brokerage, you got to offer your own load board. And maybe you slowly stop posting on other load boards, right? It's like, dude, a year and a half ago, Coyote didn't have their own load board. A year and a half ago, TQL didn't have.
They for sure started those programs. I just don't think they were as well built out as they are now.
Right. A year and a half ago, TQL didn't have their own load board, right? Carrier 360, that's a newer thing, right? I think there was a Carrier 360 is JB Hunt, right? So it's like that wasn't
By the way,
fully.
That's a terrible app. What a
Okay,
I'm sorry, JB Hunt. You guys have enough money to make a good app,
right? You guys could hire some good designers and some good engineers because what is this?
Hire me and Alex, baby. We'll take care of it.
Yeah. But so it's like, so it seems like certainly the direction is going to be more fragmentation, right? And this reminds me of coming back to cars, right? Is not the movie, but like automobiles. But
tell me you have kids without telling me you have kids,
right? But it comes back to, which is like, at first there was like this car marketplace, or cars.com and whatever else, and all this, and then there was just this thing, Auto Tempest, right? Search one and done. Search all of them.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It's like same thing with airlines. There was each airline offering their own website. You can book a flight. You have to manually search. Then there was Kayak, Expedia, whatever. Right? So it seems like we're in that middle zone, which is like it's gonna get middle zone or whichever way you want to look at it. Is there's gonna be more fragmentation. So carriers and dispatchers will have to be signed up to more load boards, and then eventually it seems like that the future will hold like a platform that will be able to search all like a aggregator platform.
Right, because like I think the flip side of like a load board having a lot of volume being a benefit, the downside of having a lot of volume is having a lot of loads to look through. Mm-hmm. It's great, it's great that DAT and Truckstop and all of them offer. I think if you go to truckstop.com and you look at how many loads they have, it's like 80,000 loads daily or something like that. That's some ridiculous number that they post, and it's like, yeah, but 0.01% is what I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. And so what 80,000 loads looks like in practice is finding a needle in a haystack.
Right.
It becomes a needle in a haystack problem. And it's like, it's great that you have so much hay, but I'm interested in the needle.
Right.
And so this is definitely a problem. And then now what you're ending up happening is like you have multiple farms that you have to visit independently to go through their haystacks to find the needle that you're interested in. And then you go to another farm. And that's the analogy.
Hold on, to make it even worse, it's like they're just copying their haystacks too. Like, because brokers are just posting the same load on every load board, right? Even with TQL, even though they have their own load board, they still repost it to Truckstop and DAT.
Because, it's interesting. It's like there's a really fascinating user behavior thing at play here. Because, like, let's say if you search, let's say, for a city with a really small deadhead, what brokers do is will post the same load in the multiple cities around that. So that way people who do have small deadheads, they don't miss out on that opportunity. And so what ends up happening is like that 80,000, how much of them are duplicates?
Ton.
For sure, like 20%, 30%. Right? And it's like all they're doing is changing the lane by just a smidge. All they're doing is changing the truck type from flatbed to flatbed hotshot to step deck. And so you end up having a bunch of the same freight. And you're like, dude, why don't they enforce this? So
wait,
fragmentation.
Hold on. To add really quick, if you didn't think brokers were good people, let me change your mind, okay? If you thought brokers were good, let me change your mind. So some brokerages out there, insert 3-letter acronym here, some of them actually post a different...
ZPL?
Yeah. They post different cities that have cheaper lane rate data.
Oh, to favor their negotiations?
So let's say you're posting a load from Charlotte to Jacksonville, right? That's a cheap lane, hypothetically. Okay. I don't know, because it's two big cities, there's tons of volume, so cheap lane. But the load is actually going, let's say, 40 miles north of Charlotte, right? Let's say you're going from Jacksonville to Charlotte, but the load is actually going to a tiny suburb 40 miles north. The lane rate data all of a sudden doesn't apply, and it's much more expensive because then you're dead. Maybe it's 50 miles, maybe it's 80 miles, but insert some analogy where it's slightly outside of the lane rate. So first of all, not only is it more miles, and so all of a sudden it changes how many your rate per miles, but then on top of that, it's a higher lane rate data, and they specifically do that on purpose to make sure that the lane rate data is low.
Interesting.
Scumbags.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things that's easy to hate, but you kind of
respect the hustle.
Yeah. Hate the player, hate the game. No, hate the player, hate the game. That's really compelling.
Well, you were talking about fragmentation.
Where we're going. I think for sure that the near term is going to be more and more of the bigger brokerages that have the resources to build out their tools. They're going to naturally offer these fragmented services. And so it's like, hey, because what I think, if I'm not mistaken, Coyote, TQL, and C.H. Robinson, what they currently do is they post on their internal markets first, and if within like within some threshold of time, like 30 minutes, if it doesn't get covered internally, then it posts to these public load boards, DAT and Truckstop. And so
as a carrier, you're missing out. Right?
You're missing out because some other carrier is using C.H. Robinson directly, and they're just booking that stuff immediately. And so it never even gets posted to Truckstop. And so this is actually compelling.
On top of that, you're also missing out. I apologize. On top of that, you're missing out because then your app, like your profile in the app, is also gauging your score. So not only are you missing out because you may not see the load, but you're also missing out because you're not improving your score. And so then you're slowly just getting worse because somebody that hauls one cheap load, and they haul 5 or a dozen cheap loads, then they have 12 loads that they did in the books, and they go like, and then when C.H. Robinson or TQL or whoever, or Coyote, when they're looking at two direct carriers submitting bids, and you haven't hauled a single load, and this other carrier hauled 5 or 10 or 12, they will go with a carrier that hauled 5 or 10 or 12, especially on top of that if you show up on time and all that other stuff too. Right. So it's like it puts carriers in a bad spot that they have no choice to sign up for all these very, very specific broker-specific load boards.
Right, and what ends up happening is your work is multiplied. Is you have one truck, but now you have to do 7 searches for that one truck. And so this is maybe where the criticism of load boards comes in, where it's like, I could just call a shipper buddy, and that's 1-to-1. And if you can pull that off, that's amazing. So then kind of it's like, well, what's the if that's where it's going inevitably? First of all, this is an interesting business dilemma for both Truckstop and DAT. How do they convince their partners to say like, hey, we're reducing fraud, we're making sure double brokers, because the double brokers are a big scam problem right now. on Loadboards. And so how do DAT and Truckstop enforce double brokering standards? Because TQL does not have that problem on their own internal Loadboard. Although they probably do, honestly, because all those people, the double brokers, just go to TQL, find a load, book it with TQL, and then repost it back on DAT. So again, you don't really eliminate the issue.
Right.
But the issue of having to go to multiple Loadboards and then having to go through the needle and haystack problem. Mm-hmm. These are the two big issues that I see. What's the solution?
An aggregator.
I was going to say dispatch. That was a perfect punchline for dispatch robot. Alex, you really screwed that up. Drum roll, please. So that's kind of the motivation for Dispatch Robot in a lot of way. And this is not a plug for Dispatch Robot, but this is literally how it started. I was like, dude, I got sick and tired of having to look through hundreds and thousands of loads to find a few good ones. And so the idea was, could you algorithmically have it sort for you and then find just the best options? Because really that's the important thing. And then what ends up happening if you have an algorithm that can sort through the load boards, what you end up having as a secondary benefit is a 24/7 dispatcher. Mm-hmm. So you can walk away from your computer, dispatch robot's still working, and this happens multiple times, but carriers book loads after hours.
Right.
Because a load comes out at 7 p.m. Who's on the load boards at 7 p.m.? No one, because normal business hours are from 9 to 5 for East Coast and from 6 to 3 on West Coast. And so you're not going to be on the load board past when everyone else is on the load board. It's like the stock market. When the stock market's closed, it's kind of pointless to do something with trading and whatnot.
Right.
I'm not a
except for reefers and stuff, this would be extremely beneficial for reefers, right? It's
reefers
because then you can load at midnight.
It's not like brokers are. It's not like brokers are working at night too. Only in extreme cases, a carrier fell through, so they have to repost it, so they just repost it for the next day. But if you're using Dispatch Robot, it's always searching, and if it's a good load, it might notify you, and then all of a sudden you can book it. Right. So I think an aggregator and then an automator.
Okay,
that's kind of the solution to all these problems. If you could just take all the load boards and do the Auto Tempest version, and you have, let's say, just one load board. It could be Dispatch Robot. It could be something else. This is a very complicated problem. This is not something that one person could do. And first, you would have to make sure you can get the data. Mm-hmm. That's the first problem, because in their entire business, DAT, Truckstop, their entire business is making money on data. Mm-hmm. So if you then go hey, DAT, you know what my solution is?
Take your
to not have people go to your website and to take your data. They're going to tell you, kick rocks, kid. Mm-hmm. And then if you can automate that, and if you could do these things, and let's say 5 years from now or 3 years from now, book it now becomes the standard, all these kinks get ironed out, think about how great this is. For some kind of X amount of subscription or even percentage-based, let's say, you could have a digital dispatcher cover your trucks. Your truck is always covered. That's kind of amazing. 24/7. It's if a load comes out at 3 in the morning and your truck, there's potential here. Now I'm just kind of thinking this is completely just futuristic. I'm saying futuristic. It's people are going to be on Mars in 10 years, and now we're talking about load boards and optimizing them. Right. This is okay. Not that futuristic, but basically, if you could, if load boards tied in, let's say, truck location and genuine truck capacity, if this could be done automatically, the algorithm. Then brokers would have a guarantee that, let's say, if let's say the bot books a load, it would also book the bot with hey, here's where I'm going to be empty, here's what time it's going to be empty, and so it would give the broker side peace of mind to have that go through automatically, or interject at that stage. It's dude, your truck is 1,000 miles away. What do you mean you're going to be there tomorrow?
It's a team.
That's what happens.
It's a strong solo.
It's a strong. It's Sergey the strong solo. Chill.
So essentially. It's a two-sided marketplace, like a load board, but not just for loads, for your location data, right? For your previous load, right? So they'd have to do a little bit more. Is essentially what it seems like.
I think to build trust in the system, something would have to give, because the reality is again, you cannot. This gets a little bit physics, and I don't understand physics that well, so it's high level. But it's energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's a pretty fundamental way of looking at life. When you realize that literally energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only be transferred. a lot of things start to make sense. And so in this case, it's like you can't create or destroy anything. You can only transfer the energy. And so it's like, what are you really doing here? It's like you're transferring human capital into like digital capital. Mm-hmm. Instead of human beings doing 80% of the work, why don't you let the robots do 80% of the work, and the humans are just kind of there to like make things go along smoothly for human-related tasks? Because I think the human dispatcher is still an invaluable aspect, especially when things go wrong. Like anytime like you have a Saturday pickup and you get to the shipper and like the gates are closed, all of a sudden it becomes a human problem. Because it's like, hey, I call, it's like, hey, my ship. It's like, oh, okay, the shipper's actually going to be there 30 minutes. Hold on, things like that. That's where human beings still are pretty great. But if you can have a bot, a digital dispatcher, I should say, that could automatically book the best loads for a carrier automatically on a network, that would be a superpower for carriers.
Right.
And then you reverse that real quick. Yeah. Sorry, reverse that, and you have a bot or a digital broker on the broker side. And they basically do what carriers and brokers do today as human beings. And that is, you have a bunch of carriers, let's say, who have automated services that go like, I want this load. And on the broker side, you have a bunch of validation checks. And you go like, well, do you have a good safety score? Do you have this? Do you have this? Like, are you going to be there in time? Is your truck empty at that location? Like all these little checks. And then it's going to just figure itself out and do a matchmaking service. It's really like an automated matchmaking service is what we're talking about here.
Right.
Is that possible?
Yeah, not yet.
I mean, it's okay. There's no reason why it's not technically possible. It's usually the human stuff that kind of gets in the way. Greed, it's like TQL will literally like cancel you and say, oh, a shipper decided not to. Customer cancel the shipment. Yeah, they just found someone for $200 cheaper. Right. So the human problem still exists here. So I think to be valuable, you kind of have to pick a side. And I'm on team carrier.
Okay, but it sounds like you're making an argument again for socialism, right? Because all these greedy capitalists, okay, they want to make an extra $200. Well, seriously. No, I'm kidding. But Dispatch Robot right now, I think the big announcement essentially of the episode is, so granted we do a lot of stuff, but essentially I think the big announcement for this week is that Dispatch Robot now supports DAT1, right? So 3 loadboards now.
My favorite time to code is at night. I'm like a vampire. And so I just pulled an all-nighter and finished writing code for DAT1 support. And so that's going to be live. This episode's going to probably be live Sunday or Monday. But DAT1 support should be live on Monday.
Okay.
And
so
then there's
Truckstop,
a couple things.
Power DAT, and DAT1. So that's the 3 loadboards that currently are supported. So that's your reducing essentially from 3 loadboards into 1, and you can just keep track of the algorithmic loads that are the best, the cream of the crop, right?
Right, you can. And then the other thing is like the value proposition of Dispatch Robot. It's $100 a month. And the real idea behind Dispatch Robot in its current stage, it's like a very small idea still, is if it could help you book at least 1 load per month that you would have otherwise missed, it's going to pay for itself in terms of cost. And if it can help you book more than 1 load per month that you would have otherwise missed, it starts to make more money than it costs. Okay. And it goes kind of back to the same fundamental of ROI as the loadboards. It's like the reason you're willing to pay loadboards is because you get business from it. The reason you would pay for Dispatch Robot is because you would get more business than it costs. Mm-hmm. And that's a fundamental value add from the carriers that are currently paying for it and from when we used it as carriers ourselves. It's very much started as a scratch my own itch type of deal. Okay. Nice. And so the future is, central dispatch, would be a good one to automate too. That one's a little bit tougher because you would have to have like a database of all the vehicles and the dimensions. Again, like this goes back to the data isn't obvious. And so a good analogy for this is like stock market bots. Mm. So like I think this could be just a number that I'm just pulling out of thin air, but I believe like 60% of all trading is done by algorithms.
Right.
Like from big banks. So JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch, etc. 60% is done by algorithms.
Right.
And they're still stockbrokers. Now, why can algorithms trade the stock market? Is because the price or the data, the financial data, is 100% accurate all of the time.
Right.
So when data is not accurate, building some kind of algorithmic platform is very difficult. And so that's kind of the problem I'm facing. It's like how do you know a load is good if it has no rate?
I don't know.
But as a dispatcher, you do know because there's hints. Like there's other things that you could look at to go like, oh, this is a good load. So if the weight is low and it's posted as a full load, and it's posted for like a peculiar truck type, let's say something that's not just standard flatbed, all of a sudden your interest might be higher than if it was 48,000 flatbed, no rate. Like 48,000 pounds flatbed, no rate is completely different than 1,000 pounds step deck, 48, no rate.
Right.
Completely different load. And so little things like that I think could potentially help. But there's no reason that I don't see that what the stock market is doing with big banks and algorithm trading, that's not possible. And then the other thing that I'm working on is machine learning right now, is because like AI just boils down to like statistics fundamentally right now. When people, if you ever hear AI, there's no like, it's not intelligence yet.
Right.
It's literally just taking a bunch of data, creating an algorithm on that data, so that way when you pass a new type of data through that algorithm, it can figure out how to process that instead of like manually coding this. And so the other thing that makes like, because like a DAT1 has this like top loads feature where they have like, they show you the top loads. Let me put it this way: the top loads suck. Okay, so I don't know what they're doing there. They're probably doing some kind of heuristic. But the other thing is like, not all loads make sense for the same carrier or different carriers. Like what you want is going to be different than what I want.
Right.
And so this is the other thing I'm working on Dispatch Robot right now, is on top of just kind of the standard machine learning model of like just using statistics, also having a bias for you as a person. Or like you as a company. For example, like maybe you prefer one broker over another. Maybe you prefer a truck type over another truck type. So things like that, putting that into the algorithm as well would make Dispatch Robot fundamentally better. And so that's the other thing that I'm kind of working on.
I was gonna make a joke.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I just want to thank our sponsors, DAT1. Joking. After we said it sucks.
No, I want to thank our sponsors, DAT1, Truckstop, and TQL.
Yeah.
Really just, titans of the industry.
Right. No,
that's funny.
I'm joking. Yeah, it makes sense. So we have a Facebook group for Dispatch Robot. If you want to like learn about dispatching, obviously Dispatch Robot, it'll be linked in the description. It's just it's a Chrome extension that helps you book more freight, right? Like essentially that's kind of the gist.
It helps you book loads that you would have otherwise missed. I think that's kind of the focal point right now. And then over time, as it becomes more advanced and supported, I think there's potential upsides here for carrier, because it's really a carrier-only tool.
Right.
And this is an important thing where brokers have to make money from. Loadboards have to make money from brokers and carriers. So think about this: is like if let's just play devil's advocate for a second and go like, what happens if DAT or Truckstop or any of these companies make their own dispatch robot? Right? Am I out of business immediately?
No.
And the reason I would say no is because, first of all, their entire algorithm has to be trained in their own silo. So because DAT doesn't see what you like on Truckstop, their algorithm can only be so good, and vice versa. Truckstop can only see what you like on Truckstop and not the overall thing. So that's the first limitation. But the second limitation is if DAT fundamentally makes money by saying, look how many loads we have, and then turns back around and doesn't show any of the loads doesn't show brokers' loads to certain carriers, brokers might no longer post on that platform.
Right.
And so you have to have an algorithm that exists outside of these tools to do all that bias, because at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're removing all of the bad. But if you're making money by letting people post their bad, you can't then go back around and say, I'm not going to show them.
Right.
I'm going to charge you to post, but no one's going to see it.
Right.
No one's going to pay you for that. And so their entire business model incentives is completely the antithesis of helping carriers.
Wow. Right.
And so this is where an interesting business opportunity comes up, is like, if you can only help carriers, genuinely, is there a business opportunity?
Right.
My belief is yes, but I could be very wrong.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. I think this is going to be a good one to wrap here. Just a good discussion on the load board. So thanks so much. We'll see you next week, right?